Yes.
Good
Sit
morning,
down.
sir. Good morning, sir.
Amritanshu.
Yes, sir.
You are from Odisha,
Yes, sir.
but studied in Pilani.
Yes, sir. In Hyderabad, sir.
Oh, BITS Pilani का address है वो.
Yes,
But
sir.
you studied in Hyderabad. So it's mentioned that your post office in Cuttack is called Chandni Chowk.
Yes, sir.
But normally when people hear the word Chandni Chowk, what comes to their mind?
So, for a typical guy, the parathas of Chandin Chowk is the first thing which comes to their mind.
You mean Chandni
In
Chowk
Delhi.
in Delhi?
Yes, sir.
Hmm.
But in Odisha, the first thing that comes to their mind is the silver filigree work which is present there.
Okay. Right. Okay. I think we can start.
So, what's your option?
So, my optional subject is political science and international relations.
Political science. And you did your BTech from mechanical or
From electrical and electronics engineering, sir.
you are working somewhere?
So, I was working at ZS Associates
Where?
in Gurgaon.
Sorry?
In Gurgaon, sir.
Which company?
ZS Associates, sir.
Okay. You tell me about that, your employer.
So, ZS Associates is a management consulting and a technology company
Mhm.
which does a lot of consulting work for mainly the pharmaceutical sector.
Okay. So, this is Indian company or?
So, it is a company based out of Boston, but one of the founders is an Indian.
Okay. So, tell me what is the basic structure of the constitution? What is the pillar of the basic structure? Do you think that as a political science student, we have any suggestion or something?
So, the basic structure of the constitution was started in the Keshavananda Bharati case of 1976.
Before that, the basic structure was not there.
So, the basic structure doctrine as a form was started in 1976 in lieu of the amending powers of the constitution which were utilized by the parliament. So, the Supreme Court felt that there was a need to ensure that the amending powers of the constitution are not unlimited, so that the basic spirit of the constitution could be maintained.
In Keshwan Bharti, what is the pillars of the basic structure?
I am sorry, sir, I am not.
What
able
is
to-
the basic structure in Keswan Bharti's case? This got it.
I am very sorry, sir, I am not able to recall the fact at the present.
Okay. What do you know about the this uniform civil code?
So, Uniform Civil Code
Is it this advisable to now? This is the right time to this implement it.
So, Uniform Civil Code is the provision to make a uniform set of laws for marriage, inheritance, adoption, among others. So, with respect to its implementation, there are a few factors which need to be taken into consideration. First is that how are we planning to implement it, whether through a uniform law or through amending the various different laws which are present in the legislature, like the different Marriages Act, the different Adoption Acts, or the different Divorces Act, or whether it can be done through a single uniform law. Additionally, sir, we also need to take into consideration of the requirements of the minorities and the tribals who have a different set of laws with respect to their place of living and the cultures they are
Which
following.
state it has already been implemented?
So, it has been implemented in some measure in Goa through the Portuguese code, and Uttarakhand is also now planning to implement it.
When the Goa was free, it was already there. Goa civil code.
Yes, sir. Prior to the
Portuguese civil code.
yes,
was
sir.
there.
Yes, sir. It was done through that.
Have
But-
you gone through that civil code, Goa civil code?
I am sorry, sir. I haven't gone through that.
Okay. So, what is what do you know about the secularism in constitution? Why it has been added?
Sir,
And we need it.
So I believe that India has been a secular society, and it was also said by Dr. Ambedkar in the Constituent Assembly that India without
But the word was not there. No?
Yes, sir. So Dr. Ambedkar mentioned that through Article 2930 and the freedom of religion, Article 25, we are already a secular country, and India's society has always been accommodative. So the word which was added in the 42nd Amendment, it just cemented the secular credentials of the Indian Constitution.
So the state should involve in the religious activities in this context.
Sir, in the Indian form of secularism is based on the principal distance model. So in some cases, the state is distant from the religious affairs, especially with respect to the essential religious practices. But in some cases, for example, in the entry of Dalits into temples, the state has been very active to pursue social reform in religion.
Yes.
So it means the untouchable castes were not allowed into the temples for quite some time.
Oh, yeah.
And the state has made certain provisions so as to allow the people to go into the temples.
Okay. So you have mentioned that you participated in a case study.
Yes, sir.
What are the basic ingredients to prepare a case study?
So the basic ingredients to prepare a case study would be as follows. First would be the context with respect to the case. In my competition, it was about how to improve women's participation in sports. And second would be the problem statement, that what exactly are you planning to do with the case. In my context, it was about how to develop a women's IPL team and help them and help in their promotion and help to increase the acceptability of women in sports in India.
So this is not a case study. Case study is for something which has already happened. This would be a sort of project work, if I'm speaking correctly. Case study would be studying and analyzing something that has already happened.
Sir, with respect to a case study competition, the problem statements are usually
So
provided.
in that case, in your
Yes,
case,
sir.
it was called case study. You have mentioned chess as your hobby.
Yes, sir.
Who was the first Indian grandmaster?
So it was Vishwanathan Anand.
Okay. Who is the current Indian grandmasters? How many of them?
So at present, we have 84 grandmasters in India.
Okay. What are the various kinds of openings in chess?
So with the white, mainly 3 kinds of openings are played.
You think the black also opens?
So black will respond in a particular way.
No, you said with white opening.
Yes, sir.
Does the black also open?
So in the opening, the responses of the 2 players make
No,
it an
the
opening.
black responds. No,
Yes,
black
sir.
never opens.
Yes, sir. Black doesn't
So-
open. He reacts to it.
Huh.
So with the white, sir, you can play the 3 central pawns: the E pawn, the D pawn, and the C pawn.
Now tell me the openings.
So Royal Opes, Queen's Gambit, accepted decline, and the English opening from white. Or you can also have Knight F3, which is the Queen's defense, and additionally you can have E4 F4, which is the King's
What
defense.
is your preference of services?
So my service preference list would be IAS, IFS, IPS, IRS.
IFS is your second choice.
Yes, sir.
Over IPS.
Yes, sir.
Why?
So while I was preparing for my civil services, I did not have much idea with respect to Indian Foreign Service. But as I started to dive deeper into international relations, and others, I developed an interest. So as a result, I put IFS over IPS.
The Indian neighborhood policy has failed. Comment.
So with respect to India's neighborhood, we see that there has been a lot of tensions, and I believe that India's neighbors are have a pendulumic approach with respect to India. Sometimes they are very much pro-India, and sometimes they tend to do things which are not in our national interest. So I believe that the present thing with our neighbors will be resolved soon, and we have developed good relations with all our neighbors.
So you think that all the problems of India's neighborhood policy emanate from our neighbors. India has no role.
So with respect to India's stand, sometimes we see that India also has a role in exacerbating the challenges in our neighborhoods. For example, with respect to Nepal, for quite some time we had this big brother approach. So as we are now evolving out of that.
How was this big brother approach on display?
So for one of the treaties, the Nepali Prime Minister was present, but from our Indian side only the ambassador was present. So the Nepalis felt that it was an insult to their Prime Minister as a lowly official.
Any other examples?
So the one-sided blockade of the Nepal by the Indians during the Madhesi issue within the territory.
Why is Bhutan now falling apart? Why is falling apart in the sense that it is going towards the Chinese camp?
So there are a few factors with respect to Bhutan's dilemma. So it is caught between two major powers, China and India, and China has been pressurizing Bhutan along Doklam and along the Sakteng National Park. And recently they had some sort of a talk with them, but then Bhutan's king also came to India to brief India about the status of their talks. So I believe that Bhutan is still very much in India's camp.
Okay, but do you think that it is tending to go towards China? It is trying to establish diplomatic relations with China. It is also on the verge of exchanging land.
So any country will prefer its national interest first. So I believe that the Bhutanese are trying to keep their national interest above our interest, and in this they are trying all sorts of mechanisms. But I believe that through diplomacy and dialogue, all our confrontations will be solved.
On a lighter note, do you need to carry a comb?
I'm sorry, sir?
Do you need to carry a comb?
Yes, sir. I believe I need to carry a comb.
Carry a comb, okay. Okay.
You said you worked in some company with headquarters in Boston.
Yes, sir.
Which was that company?
ZS Associates, sir.
Okay. So when this Boston word is heard, or the city in US, what comes to mind in Boston?
So
both historically and currently.
So historically, the Boston Tea Party comes to my mind, and in present context, the great universities like Harvard, MIT come to my mind.
So what happened at the Tea Party?
So in the Boston Tea Party, the American nationalists put a lot of the British tea which was coming into their land into the sea as a form of protest against the oppressive British regime, which was not giving them representation but was taxing them a lot.
So what did they do?
So they boarded the ships which had the tea from Britain, and they emptied all of that tea into the sea.
And where was the tea coming from?
So the tea was coming from China and India.
China and India. But how was it coming? What manner? Which were the companies that were bringing it there?
So at that point of time, the English East India Company was the main trading company, and a lot of the English East India Company ships also traveled to Britain for maintaining of the trade relations.
Any particular dress these people were wearing? These were throwing the tea in the sea? How were they dressed?
I am sorry, sir, I have to brush up on that.
That doesn't matter. You are interested in non-fiction books.
Yes, sir.
What are the books that you have been reading, non-fiction books?
So recently I completed 2 books. One is India and Asian Geopolitics by Shiv Shankar Menon, and second would be The Untold Story of India's Partition by Narendra Sarela.
So what is the untold story?
So the untold story is that at the first glance, the India's partition seems to be due to the irrefutable differences between two sides, that is Indian National Congress and the Muslim League. But once we take a deeper look, as Mr. Narendra Sarela, who was the last ADC to Lord Mountbatten, has conducted, he found out that the British played a very insidious role in instigating the Pakistani side to break away from India. And they repeatedly sabotaged any kind of back channel talks which could be done to prevent partition.
So that is what he said. What was happening in other parts of the world which may have affected this? Do you have any idea?
So there are a few factors which affected India's overall partition. First would be the World War II, which weakened the colonial empires very much, and as a result they could not maintain their hold in the Indian subcontinent, so as to speak. Second would be the role of Americans and the Soviets, who wanted a non-colonial adopted a non-colonial approach. President Franklin D. Roosevelt even appointed Colonel Lewis Johnson as the US's emissary to India, and the British tried to sabotage that as well and got him transferred to USA back again. And third would be that the British also felt that they also need to take part in the Great Game, which was occurring in the Cold War. And lastly, the partition of India was also some form of a conciliation for the global Muslim world, as Israel was also being created at the same time.
You use this term Great Game. What comes to your mind, to people's mind when the term the Great Game is used?
So, Great Game in simple layman's ideas would be that large countries vying for preserving their national interest.
No, that's okay. But the Great Game, it has a historical context which you heard about?
So the first time the context of Great Game was in Karl Marx's work, The Eastern Question. So it initially was based in the Balkan regions on who would control that region after the decline of the various empires there. Later on it also went into Cold War, and at present the Great Game is being played in the Indo-Pacific.
Okay, now we come to the administrative part of it, and you have done your training and done initially some work in the districts. You are appointed later on either to a department or a secretariat. Your administrative service is your first choice, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So where would you like to work? Given a choice. Generally no choice is given, you're just asked to do the work. But given a choice, where would you like to be?
So, as an Indian Administrative Service officer, I am prepared to work anywhere.
Yeah, that
the
you're
state
prepared.
will
But
send.
see, after some time, you'll be in some department or the other.
Yes,
After you've done your districts.
Yes, sir.
So where, in the secretariat, let us say, where would you like to be posted? Which department?
So, my preference would be the Defense Department, and later on Ministry of Science and Technology and
Okay.
Ministry of Electronics.
Now you see, the point is that, yeah, they are both important. But generally, after the districts, you are still in the state.
Yes, sir.
You are not sent to because the defense is a central subject. And
Yes,
there
sir.
are no positions in defense. But at the state level, where would you like to be? Well, none of these would be available to you.
So, with respect to state, I would select the Education Department as the first preference, and then I would prefer the Agricultural Department.
So there are a number of current programs in education, specific programs which are being implemented. Can you name them?
So, the overarching program within the Educational Department would be the National Education Policy of 2020. In addition to that, Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan is being conducted for secondary, to cover all the schooling education of the people. Additionally, we also have Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao schemes. Additionally, we also have the Diksha scheme and the Nishta scheme for teacher training. And we also have some amount of skill development, voluntary training, among others.
You see, there was a time when education really meant that you have primary, secondary education, and then now there are so many programs and names and others. Do you think we really need it, or we have to just concentrate on education as a profession or as a subject, and that too many programs really divert attention from the main aspects of education? Do you have any views on this?
So with respect to education, we see that the educational sector has evolved over the years. Earlier we used to only have religious education, we only used to have a voluntary education with respect to it, but now with the development in sciences, the development of the humanities, need a certain amount of specialization. So at some point of time, there needs to be concerted effort across the various departments, so that the overall development of the people is improved, as well as we can contribute to the national economy through the knowledge economy.
No, what you're saying is, I mean, after all, if one looks back, there were primary schools even in British times, and we always had primary and secondary schools, and engineering colleges were there earlier. What really has, what has changed?
So I believe that the approach to education has also, there are a few changes with respect to it. First is the approach to education. Earlier the education which we used to receive was only to get, was not that important for jobs and for practical purposes. But today we are feeling that we need to have our education in sync with the employment and the developmental goals. Additionally, with the technological proliferation which is happening and the various advancements which are being made, it is believed that if you correct the education system in the schools first, you will be able to harness it and to utilize our demographic dividend.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Nayak,
Yes.
what is hobby for you? What do you mean by hobby?
So for me, hobby is something which I would do it in pastime as a form of interest.
You have mentioned watching movies as your hobby. All of us watch movies, but we don't see that as a hobby. When movie watching becomes hobby? We also use spare time to watch movies, but when does movie watching becomes a hobby?
So movie watching becomes a hobby when you are investing a good amount of your time in it, and you are able to observe the technical nuances within the filmmaking, and you have some form of interest into how films are produced, how are they marketed, and how overall film works out.
So movie watching doesn't end at the time movie ends. There is some outcomes that follow because it's your hobby. So now, what are the major transformative changes in Indian film industry?
Sir, with coming from the early 20th centuries to the present days, a few transformative changes have been observed. First would be the introduction of the vocals into movie making. Earlier the movies used to be silent, but with Alamara, which was the first movie which had dialogues in it, the domain changed. Second would be the technical aspects of movie making. Earlier we used to make it in black and white, later it became color.
What about themes?
So with respect to the themes, earlier there are clear demarcations with respect to it. First, initially when the movie...
What is the last movie you watched?
So the last movie I watched was Oppenheimer in the English and Sam Bahadur in Hindi.
Okay, so do these two movies showcase something as transformative as far as theme is concerned?
So with respect to the theme, both these movies have the common theme that common people, if they are put into extraordinary situations, can come up with extraordinary results.
I noticed that you are good at reading. You have a good control on reading books, for example. Have you read both the books of our foreign minister who's produced in the last 3 years?
So I have read the first book, Why India Matters by Dr. Jaishankar, but the second book, when I checked into Amazon and the bookstores, all of them are sold out. So I am planning to obtain a copy soon.
That shows that it is in news. It's making some ripples.
Yes,
And,
sir.
that means questions could come on it.
Yes, sir.
And so, how would you define patriotism and nationalism, and why are they different?
So, with respect to patriotism, I feel that patriotism means that one has one has pride over one's nation and one's own cultures and among others. While nationalism is a more exclusivist form of thinking about one's nation, that we are the best in everything.
Your father is financial advisor now to the chief accounts officer in Orissa? Is that
Sir,
your
actually, my dad got transferred just after I submitted my DAF. He
Okay.
is at present the Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Home Affairs.
Okay. Tell me what explains Naveen Patnaik's continuation as chief minister for such a long time.
So there are a few reasons which will explain Naveen Patnaik's administration and his administration in Odisha and the long continuation. First would be that he comes from a very great statesman's family, that is Biju Patnaik. Second, that he has transformed the BJD, the Biju Janata Dal, into a cadre-based parties, which has its workers even at the booth level. And third would be the welfare policies which were undertaken by the chief minister, so that the socio-economic profile of the people has improved since the last 20 years.
Tell me three such welfare policies or schemes of Naveen Patnaik that you are familiar, either your family or someone has benefited from.
So with respect to the welfare schemes, Kalia scheme for direct benefit transfers to the landless laborers is one of the schemes. Second would be Amlan to counter the anemia which is occurring in Odisha. And third would be the zero fatality regime in cyclone, so that no casualties are taking place in the regular
Kalahandi
cyclone.
is often described as the most poorest of poor region, not just in Orissa but also country. There are sometimes even problems of even food in that region. That means that region has enormous reasons to have grievances. Why Kalahandi has not seen any violence, revolt, insurgencies?
So, with respect to Kalahandi, there are a couple of factors which need to be taken into consideration. Initially, Kalahandi used to be one of the most backward districts of Odisha, which had recurrent droughts. It had also had a problem of left-wing extremism. But recently, we are seeing that Kalahandi has now been transformed into the rice bowl of Odisha. We are now seeing improvement in the living standards of the people. We are seeing socio-economic development within the people. And we are also seeing that cultivation is now being done with the help of the Indravati river, which flows through Kalahandi district.
Indian constitution has been amended by almost 115 plus times. Do you think it's time to rewrite a new one?
So, with respect to Indian constitution, we see that the base document has been prepared by our constitutional framers, and it was quite a comprehensive document so as to address all of India's challenges at that point of time. And they also provided the scheme for amending the constitution through Article 360 and through the amending powers. And I believe that if we are able to amend the requisite provisions of the constitution so as to bring the constitution at
My
the
last
present
question
level.
to you is, do you think political parties should be within the Right to Information Act? They should be subject to right to information.
So with respect to the present system, I believe that political parties should be subjected to right to information regime, so that more and more transparency could be generated within the political parties as well as within the overall electoral system, and ensure that there is some form of internal democracy
What are
within the political
electoral
parties.
bonds?
So electoral bonds are the formal ways of financing the election. So in this, a person can buy an electoral bond from a registered SBI branch to fund the party of his or her choice.
Okay, how is that different from old-time donations?
So earlier, a lot of donations used to come from cash format. So electoral bond is a necessary step to formalize election funding and party funding.
Can you identify as to who is giving these electoral bonds to whom?
So I believe that
Donations could be identified as who was funding who.
so with respect to identification of donation, we see that every donation in electoral bond is coded by a alphanumeric character, a 16-digit alphanumeric character, and whose information is only present with the SBI. So if government wants, it can make it public, and mostly we find that common people or the corporates tend to give money to the political parties.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.